Which brings us to the final movie. It's very hard for me to save Star Wars at this point. It seems that Disney's story has become nothing more than a pandering to the wallets of children's parents, and a political platform for Kathleen Kennedy. While I was alright with Palps coming back, as it would have otherwise invalidated a 1,000-year plan of the Sith, as well as the entire first 6 movies, their execution was even worse than when they brought him back in the Legends story Dark Empire. Most of the Legends books just ignore that story as if it didn't happen. But this Palpatine seemed to do even worse. He could have simply made another Snoke to take over and kept ruling from the shadows, but instead, after decades of hiding, he spouts up over a game of Fortnite, "I'm back, bitches!" Everyone knows his voice. Everyone knows who he is. Everyone has suffered from his machinations. And everyone will be coming for him. But I digress. On to what I feel is the only way to salvage Star Wars from the ruin Disney has wrought. Clones. That's how we fix everything. Clones. Yes, Palpatine is a clone. But so is Luke, Han, Leia. Just about everyone in the New Republic was a clone of their original self. At least the heroes. It would explain everything. But first, I must go back to the beginning of this clone theory. Let's just say that the Empire, or perhaps Palpatine himself, upon being bested by the Rebellion time and time again, came up with an idea. Rather than a superweapon or a virus, clone replacements. It's been done before, though the technology had been allegedly lost. Let's say that at some point between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, Palpatine managed to get DNA from the various heroes of the Rebellion. Most of the DNA probably came from Bespin, where Luke left his hand, and Han, Leia, and Chewie, and also Lando, left blood, spit, and hair. While in prison, they could have also made copies of 3PO and R2's memory banks, and constructed droid replicas for them. Admittedly, R2 wasn't imprisoned, but there was quite a long time while he was alone, between losing sight of Luke and meeting up with Chewie and 3PO later. As for the other members of the Rebellion hierarchy, several of them, Mon Mothma, Glial Akbar, and Wedge Antilles, used to work for the Empire, so their DNA could have been on file. Now, why would they go to the trouble of cloning all these people? To replace them, of course. But if they were to replace them with Imperial agents, the Rebellion might get wise and survive. What if instead the clones didn't even realize they were clones? What if they were only altered slightly to make them completely incompetent? Mon Mothma to give in to political pressure and demilitarize. Leia to never let go of her hatred and make stupid mistakes that would cost her in the future. Han to lack commitment to family. Chewie to... well, the Chewie clone seemed fine. And of course Luke to be a whiny little crybaby who would quit as soon as the going got tough. Now, to train up these clones, they were placed in a little nowhere system like Hosnian and implanted with memories of fighting the Empire, then left to their own devices as part of a simulation to see how they'd fail the New Republic. Many of the people in the Hosnian system may have had no idea what was going on. They didn't know about the Rebellion and the Empire, and were only told by these various factions. But how can you have a war with only one side? A couple Imperials must have also been cloned and given the task of pretending to be a new empire called the First Order. The fighting would have convinced everyone. Then what happened? Well, on one hand, we can say that the plan went off without a hitch, that Palps knew he might die, and set up contingencies to replace all the Rebellion heroes with the incompetent clones so the new Republic they established would be easy to beat. But to believe that would be to believe that the heroes of my childhood are as incompetent, if not more so, than these clones Disney has tried to convince us are the heroes. I prefer to go by the logic of the Maw installation. In the stories, there was a top-secret Imperial superweapon research facility concealed in the Maw cluster of black holes. They remained isolated from the galaxy at large, only to be discovered by coincidence or by the will of the Force. This group had been tasked by Tarkin himself to make superweapons even better than the Death Star. But since Tarkin was the only one who knew about them, his death left them completely in the dark about events going on in the rest of the galaxy. I'm not even sure if Palpatine knew they were there. Now, what if Palps got too weak from his transition through the Force to remember his clone plan? What if they kept on going through their simulation, both New Republic and First Order believing they were the real successors to the Rebellion and Empire? What if the Dark Empire series of legend still happened, but Palpatine's spirit deteriorated as he took over each clone body, and he forgot about the Hosnian plan? He demonstrated several poor choices in that comic too, becoming too trusting, overconfident, and eventually, rather than possessing any person, got trapped in a Jedi, and they both died and were pulled into the netherworld of the Force. But what if he wasn't? What if at the end of the comic, his soul wasn't swept into the netherworld of the Force, but he managed to escape to his one and final clone body, the one on Exegol? However, the difficult transition would have led to his mind and body becoming even more damaged than before. By now, Palps would have believed that the clone New Republic was the original, that this decrepit clone body was the only one he ever had, and that the clone First Order was the original. He may have forgotten all about the events in the main galaxy. He would even try to use Snoke as a puppet until he got killed, and by then, the last of his sanity would have snapped. And then he would yell out to the entire galaxy, "Come at me, bro!" This theory explains a lot. Apart from the obvious flaws of the main characters, it explains why Ben Solo looks nothing like his mom or dad. Probably genetic tampering. It explains how the New Republic could be so incompetent, and explains both Luke's hatred of and eventual affinity for his father's lightsaber. After all, he was cloned from the hand that was gripping it when it was cut off. As for Rey's parentage, she very well may be a Palpatine. Palps concocted several biological experiments on various women, impregnating them with foreign DNA, sometimes his own. This was kind of his own version of a Sith spawn. Rey could indeed be the daughter of one of the thought-to-be failed offspring who was cast out. It also explains why the rest of the galaxy is greatly ignored by the sequel trilogy. All of the planets in the sequel trilogy, save Tatooine at the end, are ones we've never heard of before. Ones with really weird names like Jakku and Takodana and Crate. This galaxy is a vast expanse. Does Disney really believe us to expect that the New Republic slapped the Empire on the wrist and let them keep Coruscant while moving right next door to its crazy mad cousins? It would be like if after World War II we let the Germans keep everything they'd conquered and then moved into Poland. So, in the end, this is how I could fix the Star Wars story. And here's a little idea of how the scene would go. Rey shows back up on the Lars homestead on Tatooine and starts living there like a hermit. A couple years later, she's shocked to see Luke Skywalker approaching, alive and well, and with him, a red-haired woman and a child she has never met before. "Master Skywalker," exclaims Rey, prompting the red-haired woman to shield her son with her body and draw her lightsaber. This possibly devolves into an actual fight, but regardless, Luke mediates and calms everyone down. Rey recognizes the lightsaber and accuses Mara of stealing it. Luke asks to see where the lightsaber is allegedly buried, and she leads them to it. Luke takes the lightsaber and is given a vision. I kind of like the idea that lightsabers, or at least the crystals, hold memories. They go inside to try and lay this big bundle of snakes in a row. Luke says that he sensed that the buried lightsaber is indeed the one that he lost with his hand on Bespin. Yet at the same time, Mara's lightsaber was also once Anakin Skywalker's. If we remember correctly, Anakin had several lightsabers in his time during the Clone Wars, and was prone to losing a couple. One definitely was destroyed and lost at Geonosis. It's possible that Palps recovered one, repaired it, and kept it as a trophy for himself or Dooku. Thus, there would have been 2 Anakin Skywalker lightsabers in the Emperor's collection at some point or another. We'll say that the one lost at Geonosis was in the Emperor's collection, while the other one that contracted more memories through Anakin Skywalker's fall to the dark side and Luke facing off against Vader was stolen or lost at some point. At some point between the Thrawn trilogy in Legends and the canon Force Awakens, the lightsaber ended up with Maz Kanata, whoever she's supposed to be. Luke would be able to divine from the state of the crystals and would also feel shocking new memories from the Leia lightsaber. Luke calmly instructs Rey to humor him and pretend that they have never met before, or that he has amnesia, and he asks her to recount the history of the galaxy as much as she can. Mara is a little irritated by the story, but knows that it's important to set a good example of tolerance for little Ben, who is only about 6 right now. Rey tells them everything that happened according to her point of view. Mara looks into her records and finds that there was indeed a group of systems and planets at the coordinates Rey specified, but they were in the unknown regions, cordoned off by Palpatine himself. Rey tells them that she killed Palpatine, but Ben died in battle. This could lead to some confusion, with Ben saying, "But I'm not dead." "Ben Solo," Rey corrects. Why would Han and Leia name their son Ben? They barely knew Ben Kenobi. At some point, Rey shamefully admits that she is Palpatine's granddaughter. This is one of the few things that Mara believes. She knows Palpatine did several genetic experiments, some with his own DNA, and when he died, several people showed up claiming to have been the rightful heir to the Empire. Rey says she's relieved that it was just an experiment, an artificial insemination, rather than, well, you know, the idea of Palpatine having sex, to which little Ben says, "Mommy, what's sex?" Luke then calmly tells Rey his history, how Han and Leia got together and had 3 children, how the Empire was not easily defeated, with Coruscant changing hands a couple times, various Imperial warlords fighting over the scraps, Palpatine himself returning as a clone, though with severe mental and physical setbacks, leading to him making increasingly irrational decisions, only to be defeated by a Jedi from the Clone Wars, who gave his life to drag Palpatine's soul into the afterlife. Luke theorizes that Palps could have escaped Brand, the name of the Jedi who held on to him, could have escaped Brand's grip, and fled once again. The struggle to get away would have damaged his mind and body even more, and by the time he got to his clone body on Exegol, his soul was too damaged to be sustained in any body for long. As to why Rey encountered Han, Luke, Leia, Chewie, and Lando, as well as R2 and 3PO, Mara remembers an idea she suggested to Palps when she was working for him. Why waste resources battling an enemy when you can arrange for them to fail on their own? She then theorizes that the Hosnian system and Jakku and Takodana, and the entire First Order for that matter, was nothing more than a simulation program to try and create clones of the heroes of the Rebel Alliance and eventually take their place. These clones would believe themselves to be the original, but would have been ingrained with severe character flaws that would lead them to their eventual and total destruction of the government they were seeking to form. Why else would such an incompetent government exist, if not the design by someone who wanted them to fail? It's here that Rey gets angry and indignant, trying to say that her struggle is real, that her Luke was real, Han was real, Leia was real, Ben was real. Luke then defends himself, saying, "So this Ben isn't real? Am I not real? My nephew Anakin dying wasn't real? The hundreds of billions of people killed by the Yuzong Vong weren't real? I don't mean to speak ill of the dead, but your Luke seems to have given up far too easily. We both lost our family, our hand, our chance at a normal life. I've lost more students than I care to count to the dark side, and even more to war." He loses one student, and instead of dealing with it, he runs away and waits to die. Don't you find it strange that none of you wanted to check in on Coruscant, the galactic capital of the galaxy for thousands of years? You just trusted the rest of the Empire to behave, and then retreated to a couple planets, demilitarized. Rey doesn't know much of politics at this point, as she grew up isolated from the galaxy at large. Turns out that the entire Yuzong Vong War and following Swarm War still happened, but passed by the Hosnian system without either knowing of each other, just like the Hosnian cataclysm went unnoticed by the rest of the galaxy. Mara would probably say we could have used that Starkiller base against the Vong. Rey then learns of the sad state of the rest of the galaxy, steadily recovering after the Vong and Swarm Wars. She then humbly requests that Luke train her as a true Jedi. Mara is hesitant, but glad to see Rey finally express some humility. Luke agrees. At the next convocation of Jedi, he introduces Rey and the Hosnian Project. He then appoints one of his Jedi to train Rey, possibly one of the old favorites who hasn't been given enough screen time, like the Aranda twins from Galaxy of Fear. For those who don't know, that was essentially Star Wars' version of Goosebumps. In addition, it'll be their responsibility to explain the situation to the former Resistance and bring them into the Galactic Alliance. However, due to the poor timing of all this, after Rey goes back to negotiate with the Hosnian system, or what's left of it, the Second Galactic Civil War with Corellia will break out, followed closely by the Abeloth saga. Luke will blame himself even more for not keeping a close eye on Jacen after learning of the fate of Kylo Ren. After the events of the final Legends book, Crucible, Rey brings the Resistance to Coruscant, only to find that a lot has happened. There's a lot of lava everywhere, a lot of people are dead, and Luke is no longer there. Unsure of whether to trust the new government that seems to have ostracized Luke and the Jedi, she will probably go off, try to find Luke. This will lead to several new stories. Finn and the Lando clone daughter joining the Jedi Order, possibly getting trained by Ben Skywalker and Jaina Solo. Han and Chewie having the most awkward yet teariest reunion of all time, as clone Han and real Chewie are both dead. Chewie renewing his life debt to the Solo clan, including the newest Solo, Alana, Han's granddaughter, via Jason. I would also be fine with Ahsoka being discovered in a hibernation somewhere. That could be fun. Rey would probably help Luke locate Mortis and the Force Dagger, which they were looking for, so they could finally finish off Abeloth. Poe and the Resistance would have to make a difficult choice of whether to join the New Republic, now entitled the Galactic Alliance, or work directly with the Jedi Order to hunt down the Kashiri Sith threat still at large. As for Maz, I really don't know what to do with her. She always felt like a sad attempt at making their own unique female Yoda. I wouldn't be opposed to her somehow becoming important, maybe the Chief of State. For Win Dorvin, he would probably gratefully relinquish his Chief of State job to someone else. He could stay with the job, but who knows. He never seemed to show much romantic stuff. Maybe he could start a romantic relationship with Poe to satisfy all the gay shippers out there. Anyway, through all this, the stories would merge and eventually pick up 100 years later with the Darth Krayt saga. However, I feel that Alana Solo is meant to play a much larger part. Perhaps we could say that they faked her death and left her in hibernation somewhere. Stay in stasis 100 years or so, or maybe more. I mean, I know a lot of you don't know about her, but let me just put it this way. At 7 years old, she's proven herself to be as good a shot as a full-grown Jedi, even a better negotiator than her mother, Hapen Queen Tenel Ka, grandmother, Leia Organa Solo, and great-grandmother, Padme Amidala, combined. I wouldn't be surprised if she ends up being an even better pilot than her grandpa, Han Solo, and great-grandpa, Anakin Skywalker. Possibly, once the Sith are almost completely defeated, she'll show up and make peace with them. In the final Legends book, Crucible, Luke looked as if he was just on the way to such a revelation. He decided, or realized, that creation could not exist without destruction. Light cannot exist without shadow. The Sith and the Jedi were once one order, but the pre-Sith Dark Jedi fell too far, going around making monsters everywhere and killing people. And rather than just kill them as punishment or imprison them, the Jedi exiled them and all others like them, leading to a fermenting rage that would exist for tens of thousands of years, creating an endless saga of Star Wars. Perhaps only through conversation, through understanding of one another, and compromise could the Star Wars finally end, and peace reign through the galaxy.